We have been redeemed by God's gift. Therefore, Christians should be a generous people. Christians should be especially generous, having received the gift that we've received. Today's subject is giving, of course, as I just said. This will be part 2. Last week we discussed 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9. There's a good reason for that. I think those 2 chapters are some of the finest words that we read about on giving. There are other very good passages in the Scriptures, but I'm very fond of Paul's instruction in these 2 chapters. It teaches me a lot about preaching, a lot about attitude, and a lot about expression. As I listen to this master of a teacher. The Macedonians were, their human benevolence is an example, at least, of human benevolence at its finest. They were an extremely generous people. They were very poor. They lived in a part of Europe where people were, for the most part, impoverished. And they were very, very poor people. Nonetheless, the call came out that the Christians in Judea were experiencing hardship due to poverty. They were in real serious trouble. And when Paul asked for contributions from the Macedonian saints, they were eager to give it, so much so he had to slow them down, because he thought they were being a bit too generous, giving more than they were capable of giving. Nevertheless, they gave what they chose to, and hence we've got this information about these folks. Last week we took a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We looked at the first 7 verses. Verse 5 is very important. The apostles said they first gave themselves to the Lord. This was the reason for their success in giving. And this will be the reason for our success in giving. Happily, we should be successful. We must first give ourselves. Without giving ourselves, whatever we may give, it takes the luster off of it. It could be, depending on our spiritual state, attitude, it could be that the Lord won't even acknowledge it. It's first and foremost, it's very important that we first give ourselves to the Lord. This is one of the great lessons I learned from Paul. I think it helped me very much as a preacher, from being a hard nose to what some of my brethren unfortunately say is liberal. But I've never considered myself a liberal person, but I like to be a middle-of-the-roader kindly. But I've never been, and you all know it, I've never been big on specifically handing out orders on giving. I don't think it's profitable for the most part. If our heart's in it, if we've given our heart to the Lord, all we need to know is when and how much, and we'll take care of the rest. But if we haven't given our heart to the Lord, that's when all the yelling starts and the threats and all that stuff. And I'm not going to yell, and I'm not going to threaten. I don't like to do that. I would rather try to persuade. And this is what Paul does as well. And let me point that out here in just a moment. Much like the Romans, the Macedonians had obeyed from the heart. They had given themselves to the Lord from the inside out. He said they first gave themselves to the Lord, and this was the reason for their success in giving to the saints when the saints were in need. Because they belonged to Jesus Christ, their citizenship was in heaven. Their home was in heaven. They were laying up their treasures in heaven. Heaven was everything to these folks. Therefore, if they had to get by on one meal a day in order to help folks who didn't even have that much, they were happy to do it. Because it's only going to be for a short time. They're going to get out of here, and the best is yet to come. And they understood that. Because they first gave themselves to the Lord, they were at liberty to give their prosperity to others. Will the Corinthians now do the same? Now this is Paul's point in writing this letter, 2 Corinthians 8:9. Will they follow suit? Will they do like the Macedonian saints did? He said, I speak not by commandment. That's what I was talking about just a moment ago. And here's where I learned that. He said he could. He was an apostle. It is the will of God. He could have simply commanded them to give. He said, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to try to persuade you with reason, valid reasoning, why you should want to do this and not be ordered to do it. Paul knew that if they only gave because they were ordered to do so, there was no value in what he was doing. As a teacher, of course, when you get more money and you could do more good, right, that's true. My first responsibility is to help you get to heaven. Therefore, that means I need to help you become what you need to be. Whether you give or don't give is irrelevant. Whether you give yourself to the Lord, now that's what counts. If you give yourself to the Lord, don't have to worry about the rest. It'll take care of itself. And this is the way Paul's approaching this subject. I'm testing the sincerity of your love by the diligence of others. He had been talking about the Macedonians. And he said, the reason I use them as an example, because I want to test your love. Do you love like they loved? Well, how can we tell, Paul? By your giving. Your giving is going to be a demonstration of your love for the Lord. If you love Jesus, you give. If you don't love Jesus, you hold on to it. It's not hard. I know what's in my heart. You know what's in your heart. I know whether or not I love the Lord by what I do or do not do. It's a reflection of my attitude for my God. And so it is for all of us. And this is what the apostles are talking about. I'm testing the sincerity of your love by the diligence of others, for you know what Jesus did for you. You know what he did for you. He died. I'm not asking you to die. I'm asking you to give. Since the Lord died for you, will you give to his saints? That's his point. He continues on. The Lord he died that though he was rich in heaven, yet for your sakes he became poor. He was, in comparison, he was a very wealthy man. Nonetheless, he gave away everything he had for the sake of helping those who had nothing. And he said, you know what Jesus did. He gave it all up. Now, what about you? That's his point. Will you do as much? Though he was rich, yet for your sakes, for you, he became poor. Jesus did that for me. You would think I would appreciate it. And if I did appreciate it, I would feel obliged. I don't have to have anybody tell me what to do. I think I would feel obliged to help his people. I owe him at least that much. But it's not a debt that I want to pay. It's a love that I want to share, much like he did. I want to be like my Jesus. That you, through his poverty, might become rich. He died that you, who were destitute, might be made rich. He gave up everything so that you poor people standing on death row might be able to come off of death row and have a future out in front of you. He did that for your sakes, he says to us and to the Corinthians. Now, and in this I give advice with regard to the matter of giving from a heart filled with love. because of what our Lord did for us. Now, giving that thought, he's saying, I want to give you my advice on this subject, what I think is in your best interest. It is to your advantage not only to be doing what you began and were desiring to do a year ago. A year ago, Paul had told them what the plot was in Judea, and they purposed in their hearts. They were jumping up and down. They wanted to send money to Judea, but he wasn't going there yet. He would have to make his journey. He would have to come back to Corinth, collect the money, and then go to Judea. He said, man, your heart was in the right place, okay? You got off to a great start, but a great start is meaningless unless we have a great finish, okay? And that's what he's going to get across to them. You started well. Now you have to complete what you started a year ago. You must complete the doing of it, he said. That as there was a readiness to desire it, so there also may be a completion of what you have. I'm giving you my advice. From the heart, you wanted to help God's people. But a year has gone by. That warm, fuzzy feeling of wanting to do good. It's gone through a lot of upheavals over the past year. Perhaps the passion is no longer there. Perhaps the desire isn't what it once was. It's good, he said, to have that kind of passion, but it's necessary that you complete it before the Lord can rejoice with what you've done. For if there is first a willing mind. Now see, that's why I don't think commands are helpful. There is first a willing mind. It starts in our heart. That's where everything begins. It's in our heart. We have instructions to follow, and it's imperative that we follow those instructions. But the key to success, I do believe, is a desire to follow those instructions. When it's our heart's desire to please our master, we will. Nobody has to tell me how. They may have to help me get pointed in the right direction from time to time, but they're not going to have to convince me to do it. I'm going to do it. I love God, and I want to do what he wants me to do. So the commands of the Scripture, I'm not saying they're inconsequential. I just don't think that blurting out commands is all that helpful, as much as trying to win people from the inside out. I think it's more effective. If there's first a willing mind, he said, it is accepted according to what one has and not according to what he does not have. Sometimes we feel very insignificant because we don't have much. And we can't give much. And there's other people who have a lot, and they can give a lot. And when we look at what we give compared to what they give, it doesn't look like we're doing much. But Paul wants to clear that up in their minds, because it's not the amount that a person gives. That's not key, and he'll point that out. It's from the heart. If there's first, they had first given themselves to the Lord. If there is first a willing mind, your gift is accepted, not based on what you have, not based on what you do not have. That's not the deciding factor. Whether I give little, whether I give much, doesn't matter, okay? If I got much and I only give a little, of course it matters, but that's not the problem. The problem isn't in my pocketbook. The problem's in my heart, okay? So the amount is really inconsequential. The reason, that's the biggie. That's the one that matters. The Lord looks at the heart. That's how he judges us. Remember the widow's mite. Everybody remembers the widow's 2 mites. I don't know how much the rich man gave on Treasury Day. I don't know how much Paul, Peter, or any rest of them gave. I have no idea. But here's a little insignificant woman, I don't know what her name is, And the whole world knows what she gave. She got 2 mites. 2 mites. Your penny's worth more. She gave 2 mites. No. She gave all. She gave herself. And you can't give more than that. It may have only been 2 mites, and everybody may have got tickled when they seen it. But Jesus said that woman gave more than anybody here today. Why? From a willing mind. She had first given herself to her Lord. For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened. Now, we need to pay attention to this because given what's going on in politics right now, especially the Democratic Socialist side, I want you to make sure that you understand that Jesus was not a Marxist, communist, or socialist. I heard a senator the other day that said that Jesus was a Marxist. These things are becoming popular. And it's not good. That is not good. That is really, really, really not good. Check your history out. It doesn't go well for those who give to it. But by an equality. I don't mean that others should be eased and you burdened. I don't mean that you should give away everything you got so somebody else can have something. You say, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about equality. What do you mean by equality, Paul? Well, let's see what I think. I think that all may be just and equal in benevolent gifts. That's me, okay? That all may be just and equal in benevolent gifts. Suppose we had a command of how much we ought to give like the Jews did. And the Lord said we were to give 10%, okay? Now this was a system of equality. Everybody was to give 10%, okay? One fellow makes $100, the other fellow makes $1,000. Well, come Treasury Day, what do? The guy with $100 gives 10. The guy with $1,000 gives 100. That's called equality. The guy on the right, he gave more. No, he didn't. He gave the same. He gave 10%. It's not the dollar value that a person gives. It's the percentage of what a person has to give. This is what counts. This is, when I look at our offering, what we do in the area of benevolence, what I look at is the percentage of our treasury that goes to benevolent efforts. We generally run somewhere between 60 and 68%, which is really quite high. We may not give the dollars another church may give. I doubt seriously they'll match the percentage that we give, because this is a very generous congregation. And it's been that way as long as I've been keeping up with the numbers. Well, and this is what Paul is talking about. When he talks about equality, that's what he got on his mind. Look what Albert Barnes said. I think it's wonderful. Albert Barnes said that no unjust burden should be borne by any one member of the family of God. That you shouldn't have to bear more of the burden than I do. There should be equality, okay? Every Christian should bear his due proportion. Each one of us should do what we're capable of doing. And if we do, we've done what the Lord requires of us to do. May not be as much as the guy next to us, but it makes Jesus happy, and as long as he's happy, we got nothing to worry about. That's all that matters. The Christian system is much different than the Mosaic. Under the Mosaic economy, their offerings weren't measured by the love they had. In the Christian system, that's how it's measured. We weren't given a 10%. No, we don't have a tithe. The Lord says, basically, let me paraphrase his thought, you give in the same proportion that you love me. It's easier to give 10%. But when you are giving based on your love, the Lord then knows how much we love him. That always gives me heartburn. I used to fudge on my offering. I didn't give what I should have. I knew it, and I knew the Lord was watching, and it troubled me something fierce. Woke me up a number of times. Finally, I repented. It ain't worth it. The money wasn't worth it. And I repented and did what I knew I ought to have been doing the whole time. Sorry thing. That now, at this time, equality, that now, watch him now, right now, at this time in history, today, your abundance may supply their lack. You Corinthians, you've done very well. That your prosperity would supply the lack of the people of Judea. That their abundance also may supply your lack. That there may be equality. That their abundance. What does he mean by all that? Well, he says that now at this time, since you Corinthians have got, you're doing good financially. The people of Judea, they have it hard. So now at this time, it's in the best interest of all people involved that you help those who can't help themselves. Because you never know. You never know. 5 years, tables might flip. It might be you poor, and it might be them who's doing well. And that's what he means in the latter part. That they, given those circumstances, that they may supply what you lack, okay? That they can help you. It's good for you to help them today because the tables might be reversed one day and you may need them to help you. Now, that's not a good reason for giving, but it is a part of the equation. There's one thing that we never want to lose sight of, is that it's God who controls the purse strings. He decides this nation will be prosperous, and this one will suffer. That's God. This is his world. When he looks out over the entire planet, he can make this one wealthy, he can make this one poor. And if he wants to, he can reverse the circumstances. He has to a number of times. We've all read it in the Bible, the book of Judges. 15 times we watched the tables flip in the book of Judges over a 350-year period. Why? Because God controls the purse strings. If we're well-to-do and we're stingy, there's a good chance we might lose it. Not by a crook, but by the Creator. Jesus is not a Marxist, communist, or a socialist. I've heard this so much. I heard a preacher call him a socialist about a year ago, I guess. Said Jesus, he was not a socialist. He's a capitalist. And it irritates me beyond belief when people say that about him. Listen to what Paul wrote in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10. If anyone will not work, what should you do? Neither should he eat. Now, we don't go by that rule. We don't follow this rule because we're smarter than God. We're more compassionate than God. We're more caring than God. We're socialists. We'll give to people who don't want to work. We don't care because we feel for them. Our Lord is not a capitalist or a Marxist or a socialist or a communist. He believes that we ought to work for what we have and that each one of us ought to be taking care of our own business. Don't listen to these politicians. They're going over too far to the left. They're going to drop off over in the ocean, the Pacific, and we're all going to pay for it. This nonsense has gone on long enough. It's got to stop. Anyway, there's my political speech for the day. As it is written, he takes us from Exodus chapter 16 and verse 18. Let's look at what Moses wrote. This is the thing which the Lord commanded. Let every man gather it. Gather what? Gather manna. He's talking about the gathering of manna. That every morning, let each man gather his manna. How? According to his needs, 1 omer for each person. According to the number of persons, let every man take for those who are in his tent an omer. Give or take 5 pints, okay? An omer. Let each person take 1 omer for each person that lives in your tent. That may include your wife, your kids, your grandparents may live with you, your mom and daddy might live with you. 14 people living in my tent. I got a big tent. Well, what do? We got 14 omers goes into that tent. We all understand it's really simple. 1 omer per each person. Well, the children of Israel did so, and they went out and they gathered their omer. Some gathered more than an omer, and some gathered less than an omer. Well, boy, we got a problem with this one. Look what Paul said, or Moses said, 1 omer per person. But some people gave more than an omer. Some people gave less than an omer. How are we to understand this? Well, I think we can do a little deductive reasoning and perhaps come up with a solution, because I don't know of anything definitive. So let's try it this way. In the next verse, he said, so when they had measured it by omers, he who gathered much, he had nothing left over. He who gathered little, he had no lack. Some gave more, some gave less. The guy that gave more, he had nothing left over. The guy that collected only a little, he had plenty to eat. One guy collected a lot and had nothing left over at the end of the day. The other guy collected just a little. He didn't even get an omer. He got a spoonful maybe. And yet we're told he had no lack. Okay? What does he mean? Well, let's think about it for just a moment. They. Who are they? They. They measured it by omers. Who are they? I don't know. Okay? I really don't know, but I think we can take a guess in just a moment. They measured it being the manna, they measured the manna by omers. They measured it by omers. Now remember what Moses wrote in the verse before. The children of Israel did so, and they gathered the manna. Some gathered more than an omer. Some gathered less than an omer. And yet at the end of the day, everybody had exactly what they needed. Here's what I think. I think there might have been a community collection of some sort. It could have been by tribe, could have been by area, I don't know. I think there may have been a community collection of some sort that existed among the tribes of Israel at this particular time. Young people, strong, well, they can collect much. They can collect a whole lot. They can collect more than an omer. They're physically fit, and if have to, they'll run. Old people, they don't run. You watch me walk around. You see how old people get around. They move slowly. They may not be able to collect as much. What about the sick? What about the infirmed? What about those who couldn't walk? They were lame or paralyzed. How do they collect their food? You see, there's a problem here. We have a problem. Well, I think this was the solution to the problem. I think when everybody came back, they took what they had collected. One guy, he has 5 people in his tent. Nevertheless, he collected 10 omers. Another guy, he had 2 people in his tent, and he only collected a quarter of 1 omer. I think when they went back to their particular spot, they may have taken the manna that they collected, put it in this community collection bin, let's call it, and then it was doled out. Each person receiving an omer, complying with the Mosaic law. That's the law. Each person gets an omer. Okay? Does that sound reasonable to you? Let's go a little further. They, I think, would be those who distributed the manna. They measured the manna out by omers. People may have put in 10 and only got 5 back. Okay? Did they have to collect 10? No. They didn't have to do that. But they did do that because they were kind. They were compassionate. Because they loved one another. They knew, oh, brother so-and-so down there, he's going to have to crawl on his hands and knees. He's not going to collect much. They knew that. You see, they weren't just collecting for themselves in their hearts. They knew they were collecting for others too. This is what I believe. I think it's implied within the text. Those who had given much, therefore, shared with those who had only collected a little. Okay? How? Well, it all went into the common community, and then it was doled out by omers. The one who had much, he collected 10 omers, he got 5 back. The one who had a little, he had a quarter of an omer, he got 2, because there's 2 people in his 10. Okay? The point is, they both got the same. Okay? Each person got the same. He who had gathered much, he had nothing left over. He who had gathered little, he had no lack. We've solved the dilemma. I don't think it's hard. I think it really makes a lot of sense. But it was a voluntary thing people did. They were volunteering to help their fellow man because they loved their Lord and because they loved one another. Now, what about us? What about us? We give. We give too. What moves me to give? Is it because I have to? Oh, the Lord doesn't want us to give like that. He doesn't want us to begrudge our giving because we have to give. That's not what he's looking for. He doesn't need my money. If I don't give what I ought to give, he'll just go make somebody rich and they'll give it. Okay? If this congregation won't give what it ought to give, he'll go make somebody rich and they can give as much as all of us give. The Lord doesn't have a problem with things like that. That's what Mordecai tried to tell Esther. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, the Lord will get it somewhere else. He's not going to let the people of Israel suffer because you won't do what you're supposed to do. He'll just get it somewhere else. That's what God does today. The ball's in our court. Do we give because we love? Do we give because we have to? Or do we just not give at all? It's a personal question. It's what I have to ask myself. It's what you have to ask yourself. But at the end of the day, when we stand before our magnificent Creator, he's going to know what we did. And he's going to know why we did it. And I want him to love me so bad I can taste it. And so do you. If you need God's forgiveness today, if you're not a Christian, we can help. If you are a Christian, we can help. If you need God's forgiveness today, I beg you from the bottom of my heart, come and let us support you while we stand and while we sing.
Rock of ages, cleft for me, let